want you to just close your eyes for just a second. I mean, really picture this. Imagine you're standing outdoors.
Right, maybe in a garden or on a patio somewhere.
Exactly. And the sun is just starting to dip, so you've got that golden hour lighting, there's a gentle breeze, and suddenly this incredibly complex aroma just hits you.
Oh, man. That smell is unmistakable.
It really is. It's this distinct, earthy, like almost floral scent of saffron, and it's mixed with the rich sort of oceanic steam of evaporating fish stock.
And, as you follow that scent, you start to actually hear it before you see it.
Yes, you hear this loud, rhythmic, aggressive sizzle, like fresh seafood and cold olive oil hitting intensely hot metal.
It's almost musical.
It is. And then you open your eyes and you see it. The warm, flickering glow of an open flame. And gathered all around it are people, right? They're laughing, holding glasses of wine, and they are completely mesmerized by this culinary theater happening right in front of them.
And what's genuinely crazy about that image is that 10 or 15 years ago, you would almost never see that at a luxury corporate event.
No, never.
Or a high-end wedding either. I mean, you'd see a sterile carving station maybe, chafing dishes with those little gel flames underneath them.
The sternos. Yeah, totally uninspiring.
Right. But today, that massive sizzling pan of rice has just completely overthrown high-end event catering. We're witnessing this massive cultural shift toward what the industry is calling the Mediterranean vibe.
Mediterranean vibe. I love that.
Yeah, it's evolved from just being a niche cultural dish into like the ultimate centerpiece for luxury interactive dining.
Which is fascinating because the entire landscape of how we feed large groups of people is changing. And so the mission for our deep dive today is to really figure out the exact mechanics of this.
How it all actually works.
Exactly. How a wide metal pan and an open flame can fundamentally alter the psychology of a crowd. Because, I mean, this is no longer just about passing out calories to guests, right?
It's about engineering an atmosphere.
Right. So we're going to look at the thermodynamics of the equipment, the cognitive biases that make food taste better when you actually watch it cook, and, of course, the insane logistical ballet required to pull this off.
Because you do not want to ruin a 200-person event. The logistics alone are just fascinating.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, because as our sources point out, you aren't just cooking here. You're performing a highly sensitive chemical reaction in front of a live audience.
Outdoors, no less.
Exactly. Outdoors, fighting the wind, the temperature drops, the elements.
Which is exactly why the stakes are so incredibly high for whoever is actually planning the event. Like, if you're listening to this right now and you're in the thick of planning a wedding or, trying to coordinate the food and drinks for a luxury destination event.
You really have to know what you're doing.
You do. The absolute worst thing you can do is just blindly search for a caterer online and hope for the best. You need highly specific, vetted guidance.
Absolutely. It's a very specific skill set.
It is. And honestly, the smartest move you can make is to lean heavily on the Weddizer website. If you use the Weddizer website for food and drinks purposes, you're going to be so much better off.
Oh, yeah. Their resources are incredible for this kind of thing.
Totally. You can find the best hiring for wedding events guidance through the articles section on the website, specifically related to this niche. Because hiring a chef who knows how to cook in a quiet commercial kitchen, that does not mean you're hiring someone who knows how to manage a 50,000 BTU open flame in the middle of a windy garden party.
Right. That distinction is just critical. The skill set required here is entirely different. I mean, a traditional chef controls their environment, but a live fire paella chef, they have to manipulate the environment.
That's a great way to put it.
And to understand how they do that, we really have to start by looking at the literal foundation of the entire operation.
You mean the pan itself?
Exactly, the physical vessel.
So let's get into the anatomy of the paella pan. Because according to the research, this is a piece of equipment with roots deep in the agricultural fields of Valencia, Spain.
Yeah, it goes way back.
And the traditional design is unmistakable, right? It's extremely wide, incredibly shallow, and it's typically forged from carbon steel or stainless steel.
Yep, that's the classic look.
But let's interrogate that design for a second. Because if I'm a caterer and I'm trying to feed 200 people, geometry tells me a massive, deep, commercial soup pot would be way easier.
Or even a giant wok, right.
Yeah, exactly. A giant wok would take up way less physical space, and it would hold the exact same volume of food. So why are we chained to this wide, flat saucer?
Well, if you tried to cook this dish in a deep pot or a wok, You would completely destroy the fundamental chemistry of the rice.
Really?
Yeah.
Just from the shape of the pot?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The wide, shallow geometry is an absolute non-negotiable culinary mandate. It's not just for looks.
Okay, break that down for me. Why is it non-negotiable?
It all comes down to the physics of starch gelatinization. And really the pursuit of the holy grail of paella, which is the socarrat.
Ah, the socarrat. I've heard people obsess over this. That's the perfectly crispy, deeply caramelized layer of rice at the absolute bottom of the pan, right?
Exactly. But it's really important to understand that it's not just like crunchy rice.
It's more than that.
Way more.
Yeah.
The socarrat is the result of a highly controlled Maillard reaction. It's the precise point where the proteins and the reducing sugars in the dish meet the intensely hot metal and caramelize.
So it's basically concentrating all the flavor right at the bottom.
Yes, it concentrates the stock, the saffron, the seafood fats, the olive oil. It forms this deeply savory crust, but it's a razor-thin line between perfectly toasted and, bitterly burnt.
I can imagine. So how does the pan shape help with that?
To achieve that crust without burning it, you need rapid, uniform evaporation.
Okay, so walk me through the physics of that evaporation. Why does a deep pot fail so miserably?
Well, think about the ratio of surface area to volume. In a deep pot, you have a massive column of liquid, right? But only a very small surface is actually exposed to the air.
Oh, right. So the water is trapped.
Exactly. The water just cannot evaporate fast enough. So the rice at the bottom is essentially just boiling under immense pressure.
That sounds like a recipe for mush.
Yeah, it is. Furthermore, authentic paella relies on specific short-grain rices, things like bomba rice, which absorb up to 3 times their volume in liquid.
3 times. Wow.
So if you stack bomba rice deeply in a pot, the sheer physical weight of the hydrating rice, plus the liquid above it, will literally crush the grains at the bottom.
Oh, wow. So you don't get a soparot at all. You just get a dense, impenetrable paste.
Precisely. It turns into mush.
It sounds like the pan is essentially acting as a culinary solar panel.
A solar panel. I like that.
Think about it. A solar panel is designed to be as wide and flat as possible to catch maximum sunlight across its surface area.
Right.
So the paella pan is designed to catch maximum heat from the open flame beneath it, and then instantly distribute that thermal energy across the widest possible expanse of rice.
That is a perfect analogy. Yes.
It ensures every single grain is exposed to the exact same rate of evaporation, spreading out all that rich flavor from the stock.
Exactly. The shallowness ensures that the liquid cooks off at precisely the right rate, so that right at the end of the cooking process, the liquid is gone.
And then what happens?
Then that bottom layer of rice begins to literally fry in the residual olive oil and the rendered animal fats. That frying action is what actually creates the socarrat.
Okay, that makes total sense. And the material of the pan plays into that heat distribution too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because the sources we're looking at for this deep dive highlight carbon steel as the gold standard. But carbon steel is notoriously finicky.
It is. It rusts. It requires constant seasoning. It's high maintenance.
Right. So why not just use massive cast iron pans? I mean, if heat retention is the goal, cast iron seems like the obvious choice.
See, that's the misconception. Because heat retention is actually the enemy in this specific scenario.
Wait, really? The enemy?
Yeah. Think about how cast iron works. It holds heat incredibly well, right?
Right.
Which means it's slow to heat up, but critically, it's very slow to cool down.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. If a chef sees that the socarrat is developing too quickly and is about to burn, they need to react. But turning down the flame under a cast iron pan won't stop the cooking.
Because the pan itself is still roaring hot.
Exactly. The residual heat in that heavy iron will just continue to scorch the rice, even with the flame off.
Ah, so cast iron lacks thermal agility.
Precisely. It's
Yeah.
too slow. Carbon steel, on the other hand, is relatively thin. It has a molecular structure that conducts heat incredibly fast.
So it reacts almost instantly to the flame.
Exactly. If the chef drops the heat, the carbon steel cools immediately. That allows them to ride that razor's edge of caramelization without crossing over into burnt carbon.
That's fascinating. What about stainless steel, though?
Well, stainless steel is sometimes used in modern catering, mostly for its durability and, anti-rust properties. But a highly skilled chef will almost always prefer the raw responsiveness of carbon steel.
So, because of this strict requirement for shallow evaporation, if you want to feed a massive crowd, you literally cannot build up. You have to build out.
Wide.
And that results in pans that are genuinely enormous. We're talking about vessels that can be 3, 4, even 5 feet across.
They're massive. Sometimes they need 2 or 3 people just to carry the empty pan.
Which brings us to a fascinating psychological shift. Because a pan that size cannot be hidden on a back burner in a kitchen. It physically demands space.
It does. It becomes the center of gravity in the room.
Exactly. And by demanding that physical space, it inherently alters the social geography of the event.
Yeah, it really creates a gravitational pull. Historically, when agricultural workers in Valencia created this dish, they cooked it over an open fire of dried vine branches right in the middle of the fields.
So it was always an outdoor communal thing.
Always. They didn't even plate it. They just gathered around the massive pan and ate directly out of it with wooden spoons.
That's amazing.
Right. That DNA of communal gathering is literally forged into the physical dimensions of the pan. So when you drop a 4-foot steel vessel of fire and food into the middle of a luxury wedding reception,
You're basically recreating that ancient agricultural hearth,
exactly, you're bringing people back to the fire.
which forces a complete evolution in how we approach catering. We're moving from the stationary object, the pan itself, to the incredibly dynamic human behavior surrounding it.
The kitchen wall is completely gone. There's no barrier anymore.
Right. Let's really interrogate this psychological shift. Because why has live culinary entertainment become such a dominant force in high-end events recently?
It's a huge departure from tradition.
It is. Historically, the wealthy wanted the labor hidden. The ideal banquet was one where perfect plates of food just magically appeared from behind swinging doors.
Right, so the guests didn't have to see the mess or the sweat or the noise of the kitchen.
Exactly. It was all about the illusion of effortlessness. So what changed?
The psychology of luxury has fundamentally changed. What you're describing is the old model of formal luxury, where value was derived from seamlessness and absolute quiet.
Like a fine dining restaurant where the waiters wear white gloves and whisper.
Exactly. But today, the luxury market is driven by experiential authenticity. Guests don't just want a perfect plate of food anymore.
They want a story.
They want to feel connected to the origin of the food. So when you break down that fourth wall and put the chef right in the center of the room, you invoke what behavioral economists call the labor illusion.
The labor illusion. Okay, break that down for me. How does that work here?
It's a cognitive bias where people actually assign a higher value to a product or service if they can visually see the effort that went into creating it.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. Like if I hand you a beautifully plated piece of fish from a hidden kitchen, you might appreciate it. It's nice.
But I don't know what went into it.
Exactly. But if you stand there with a glass of wine and you watch a chef expertly manage a roaring fire, toast the saffron, painstakingly layer all the ingredients, and just sweat over the pan for an hour.
Then when you finally eat it, it's a completely different experience.
Exactly. When you finally take a bite of that exact same fish, your brain perceives it as vastly more valuable and delicious, simply because you witnessed the labor required to produce it.
So the chef transitions from a hidden laborer into a master craftsman. And the pan becomes their stage.
Exactly. It's theater.
It's the culinary equivalent of like an open concept mechanical watch.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Right. You're paying a premium specifically to see the gears turning. You aren't just buying the time, you're buying the visual of the engineering.
Yes, people want to see the craftsmanship in real time.
But let me push back hard on this for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
In a theoretical bubble, watching a chef work is beautiful, I get it. But in the chaotic reality of a 200-person wedding,
It can get messy.
right, you have a massive crowd of people who've been drinking, they're in heels or tight suits, and they are hungry. Doesn't placing the food prep in the middle of the room create a catastrophic bottleneck?
That is the ultimate fear for event planners, yes.
Because you're essentially forcing people to stand around and stare at their food for 45 minutes before they're actually allowed to eat it. And we all know anticipation turns into hanger very quickly.
Very quickly. It's a huge risk.
So how does an event planner justify that risk? How do they avoid a mob of angry guests?
Well, that is the exact logistical nightmare that separates an amateur caterer from a professional live fire production team. And it's why the psychology of the pacing is so critical.
Okay, so how do the professionals pace it?
A professional team doesn't just make the guests wait in silence, staring at a pot. They use the cooking process itself as a structured form of entertainment, and they layer it with immediate gratification.
So they're throwing them a lifeline while the main event cooks, like snacks to keep the peace.
Exactly. While the massive paella is slowly building its flavor profile, the area around the pan acts as an interactive cocktail hour.
Ah, so they keep people engaged.
Right. The chefs are actively engaging with the guests, explaining the ingredients. They might be handing out small, pre-prepared tapas. Or maybe they have someone carving jamoni iberico right next to the fire.
Oh, wow. That sounds incredible. So you're eating while you watch the main course being built.
Yes. And more importantly, the sensory cues of the paella act as a visual and olfactory countdown.
A sensory countdown? How so?
When the onions and the garlic, the sofrito, hit the hot oil, that smell instantly permeates the venue.
And everyone knows that smell. It's the best smell in the world.
Right. It signals to the crowd that the process has begun. And then, when the fish stock is poured in and it violently boils, it creates this massive plume of aromatic steam.
So the guests aren't just impatiently waiting, they're actually tracking the progress.
Exactly. It's building anticipation in a positive way.
It's almost like watching a live sports event where the tension slowly builds to a climax.
That's exactly what it feels like.
And frankly, from a marketing and social currency perspective, this setup is just genius. I mean, nobody's pulling out their phone to film a waiter dropping a piece of chicken breast onto a table.
Yeah, of course not.
But a 4-foot pan of bubbling saffron-stained rice, massive prawns, and roaring flames. That is organic social media gold.
The visual impact is absolutely undeniable. The guests are doing the marketing for the event planner in real time.
Free advertising?
Exactly. They're filming the fire, the vibrant colors, the chef tossing the ingredients, and they're broadcasting it instantly to everyone they know. It generates a buzz that a static buffet simply cannot achieve.
It's an entire experience, and it isn't just about the food looking good for Instagram either. It's about the holistic atmosphere that this entire setup generates.
The whole vibe.
Yes, the vibe, because the sources refer to this specific aesthetic as the Mediterranean vibe. And I want to dig into that, because vibes can be vague, but this seems highly intentional.
It is very intentional.
Because a vibe can only carry an event so far, right?
Yeah.
If you have a beautiful fire and perfect lighting, but the surrounding environment feels stiff and clinical, the illusion completely shatters.
Oh yeah, the contrast would be jarring.
So how does this style of cooking anchor an entire lifestyle aesthetic?
Well, the Mediterranean vibe, as outlined in our source material, is an intentional rejection of rigidity. It's built on 3 core pillars: simplicity, freshness, and celebration.
Simplicity, freshness, and celebration. I like that.
Yeah, and in the context of event design, it manifests as a deliberate listening of the rules. You see a real shift away from perfectly pressed white linen tablecloths and fine china.
Right, away from the stuffy ballroom feel.
Exactly. It moves to a rustic, exposed wooden tables, mismatched seating, and just an abundance of natural elements.
Like using food as decor.
Yes. Terracotta, fresh herbs, bowls of lemons and citrus used as actual decorations.
I look at it as an anti-hustle aesthetic. Because modern life is so heavily regimented, so optimized, and so incredibly fast-paced.
It really is. Everyone is always in a rush.
And a traditional formal dinner often mimics that rigidity. You have an assigned seat, you have 3 specific forks, and the courses are timed to the literal minute.
It feels like a schedule, not a party.
Exactly. But the Mediterranean vibe intentionally breaks that clock. The presence of the massive shared pan encourages people to pass plates, to talk over each other, to get up and walk around.
It's fluid.
Yes, it relies on the olive oil, the vibrant vegetables, and the warmth of the fire to create an environment where lingering is not just allowed, but demanded.
It creates a microenvironment of leisure. And what is truly powerful about this aesthetic is its adaptability.
Adaptability, how do you mean?
Well, it's highly thought after for destination weddings on the coast of Spain or,
Okay.
Luxury villas in Italy.
Sure, that makes perfect sense for those locations.
But the foundational elements, the fire, the communal sharing, the rustic warmth, they are not geographically bound.
See, I was going to ask about that, because can you authentically recreate this feeling at, say, a corporate retreat in a sterile business park in Seattle in the middle of November?
You'd think it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah. Doesn't it look like a cheap theme party without the sunny beach and the ocean breeze?
You absolutely can recreate it because the atmosphere is generated by sensory manipulation, not the physical zip code.
Sensory manipulation. Okay, tell me more.
Even in a cold or sterile environment, the moment you ignite a 50,000 BTU burner, you introduce immense physical warmth and a mesmerizing dynamic light source.
Right, the fire becomes the focal point.
The fire becomes the hearth. The actual light spectrum of an open flame physically changes the ambient mood of the space, making it feel so much more intimate.
That makes sense. Fluorescent lights are awful, but firelight makes everyone look good.
Exactly. And when you pair that warm light with the intense, comforting aromas of roasting garlic, smoked paprika, and rich stock, you completely override the sterility of the venue.
You're basically transporting the guests through sensory overload.
That's exactly what it is, transportive.
But the ambiance and the sensory overload are ultimately just the opening act, right?
All right, it all comes back to the food.
Because if the environment is stunning, but the food itself is bland or just poorly executed, the entire house of cards collapses. The ingredients have to match the theater.
They have to deliver on the promise.
Which brings us to the actual culinary execution. How do they build flavor at this massive scale? Because the sources break down the menu into 4 distinct pillars of paella.
Yes, the 4 pillars.
Let's look at the mechanics of these variations. Walk me through the first one.
Well, the 4 pillars really represent the core versatility of the dish. It allows it to adapt to almost any dietary requirement or event theme. And the first, and arguably the most visually iconic, is the seafood paella, or paella de marisco.
The classic. When I think of paella, I think of this. Shrimp, mussels, squid, clams, all of it.
Yes, but here's the secret. The proteins are actually just the garnish.
Wait, really? The seafood is just the garnish?
The entire soul of the seafood paella lies in the stock. A traditional chef will spend hours, sometimes days, building a deeply complex fish stock using rockfish, prawn heads, and aromatics.
Wow. So they're extracting all that flavor beforehand.
Exactly. And remember our discussion on the mechanics of evaporation.
Yes. The wide pan acting like a solar panel.
Right. As that intensely concentrated fish stock boils off in the shallow pan, the gelatin and all those oceanic umami compounds literally bind to the starches of the bomba rice.
Oh man, so the rice itself becomes the main event?
The rice itself becomes a flavor bomb. The visual of the mussels opening in the pan is stunning, sure, but it is the invisible architecture of the stock that actually delivers that rich coastal flavor.
That makes a lot of sense. The rice is basically a sponge, so whatever liquid you feed it dictates everything about the final dish.
Exactly.
Okay, so what is the second pillar?
The second pillar is actually the most historically authentic one. It's the chicken and rabbit paella, the true Paella Valenciana.
Chicken and rabbit, okay.
This one highlights the rustic inland origins of the dish. And it does not rely on a pre-made stock in the same way the seafood one does.
Oh, it doesn't. So how do they get the flavor into the rice?
The chef builds the flavor directly in the pan by slowly rendering the fat from the chicken and the rabbit, and then frying the rice and the flat green beans in that highly seasoned animal fat.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. Because while I deeply respect the historical authenticity, rabbit seems like a massive risk for a modern event planner.
It is definitely a choice.
Right. I mean, if you have a standard corporate crowd or a very diverse wedding guest list, throwing rabbit at them feels incredibly adventurous, maybe even intimidating.
It can be, yes.
People expect beef, chicken, or fish. If a guest walks up and sees a literal rabbit leg in the pan, are they going to be thrilled by the authenticity? Or are they going to head for the nearest drive-thru?
It is a highly calculated risk, and you are completely right to view it with caution.
I just can't imagine serving that to a bride's conservative grandparents.
Right. Culinary purists will absolutely revere the gaminess of the rabbit cutting through the starchy rice.
Right.
But for a broad audience, it can be deeply polarizing.
So it's a know your audience type of thing.
Exactly. It's a fantastic option for a highly curated, very food-centric crowd. But for a general 200-person wedding, it might alienate a significant portion of the guests.
Which is a disaster if it's the only food option.
And that exact dilemma is why the menu structure evolved to include the remaining 2 pillars. It ensures total inclusivity without sacrificing the spectacle.
Okay, so how do they solve the rabbit problem, or the meat problem in general?
They solve it with the 3rd pillar, which is the vegetarian paella, to address dietary restrictions, and the 4th pillar, the mixed paella, which is the ultimate crowd pleaser.
Let's analyze the vegetarian paella first, because the obvious challenge there isn't the ingredients. I mean, we know vegetarians eat vegetables.
Right.
The challenge is the flavor. If you remove the rich fish stock from the first pillar and you completely remove the rendered animal fat from the second pillar, how on earth do you prevent a massive pan of vegetarian paella from just tasting like wet, bland rice?
That is the true test of a paella chef's skill. That's where you see who really knows what they're doing.
Because they don't have meat as a crutch.
Exactly.